Now, what do you do if you're audited? I know that you deal with a lot of people who do have problems.
Right.
When someone gets a letter and says that they're being audited, which
Right.
doesn't necessarily have to end up being a problem.
Correct.
What should they do?
The first thing they should do is find out the years, of course, that they're being audited, and find out what areas on the return are being audited. For example, very rare when you have an audit, they're going to audit every line on the return. So what you want to make sure that is that the individual is just going to discuss the issues on the audit and nothing more. A lot of times what people do, they go down, they start talking, they open up the Pandora's box, and they start talking about other issues, and then they wind up getting letters for other years or other aspects of the return. Mm-hmm. The first thing to do, as I mentioned, grab your return and grab as many documentation to document your deductions on that return. But, I would recommend that they call us or someone like us, because we had an example, maybe I think it was 2 years ago, a physician was audited, and he was referred to us. Now, he went down himself, and after the audit, he owed $90,000. Now, he came to see us, and after we went through, it took us about maybe 2 or 3 months to put everything together. He wound up paying $14,000. So we reduced him from 90 to 14. Then we put him in a payment plan where he was able to maintain his practice and do what he had to do. But the point is that had he come to us directly, we would have been able to reduce it even further, because there were certain things that came out during his conversation that was just not clear, and then the IRS took a position, and we kind of had to leave it alone. But the point is that you need to be organized. Mm-hmm. Don't be fearful. We've had audits where it doesn't happen often, but it has happened, where they actually received a refund. It's very rare, but it happens. The key is, like I mentioned, is to be organized.
Now, what happens when somebody is audited? What is the process that you follow? Do you go with them? How does that work? Walk me through that whole
problem.
thing.
Okay, you receive your letter. Hopefully you call our office, and then we set up an appointment with you, and we tell you what to bring. What you need to bring in is the tax return relating to that year, and then when you come into the office, we evaluate what are the issues on the audit. We definitely would like to leave you at home at this point, because when I find is that when taxpayers go to the audits, they're very nervous, and sometimes it appears that they're hiding something even though they're not. And they often make statements that they shouldn't make. And a lot of times they don't understand the tactics that I'm using during the audit, and they might think that something is not favorable to them where in fact that it is. So it's best that they just kind of sit outside, let us deal with it in the black box, and we come out with the results. But the process is, let's find out what are the issues on the return that they're auditing, and we want to understand why. And then we want to know what kind of receipts do you have to back up what you claim. If you don't have receipts, then we want to understand, why did you take this deduction? We have to write up a reason for you taking this deduction. Because you don't have a receipt does not mean that you won't be successful, but it does mean that it's just a little harder. But if you have a legitimate deduction, for example, if a person has 2 jobs, and there's a deduction if you go between those 2 jobs to go to work every day, between the 2 jobs. If you take cabs because of the time that you have to leave job A to get to job B, and the distance is such that you must take a cab, and you have no receipts, we can document that. We can write that up and explain this person leaves at this time, and in order to get across town, they need to take a cab.
And if it's less than $25, if you can show that the expense occurred, you don't really have to have a written receipt. Is it $25?
Actually, truthfully, as long as you can explain it properly, you don't need a receipt at all. But you should have receipts, because it makes your deductions more legitimate. But your answer about the 20, yes, that is correct.
And you've mentioned several times the idea of being organized, and you've mentioned documentation as well. And I think one of the important things probably a lot of people don't realize is keeping a calendar and a journal. There's so much that you can go back and really figure out what you did if you got that kind of
because
stuff.
Our memories are short. We're dealing with so many things in life, and we tend to forget. But most people actually do not keep these journals. They should, but the bottom line is we try to, we ask certain questions to pull the information out of them legitimately to find out, okay, what do you do? How do you get there? How often do you use the car? And I find that the IRS is very reasonable as long as you present something that's intelligent and it's practical. Mm-hmm. They're very reasonable.
How long should you keep your records?
3 years. We should 3 years by law, but you should probably keep an extra 2 years just in case.
How far back can they go, though? Can't they go back further than that?
They can. What happens is that the IRS can go back 3 years, but they can extend that beyond that if there's fraud involved. So there's no statute if there's fraud. So if you're doing something fraudulent, so you need to keep those returns a little longer. But for most of us, let's keep them for 3 years.
Your fraudulent returns, everybody.
Right.
Well, I tell you, I've learned a lot today myself.
We appreciate that.
And I'm sure others have as well. You can reach Injil Muhammad at 212-684-3637.
That's correct.
That's correct?
Yes, it is.
Thanks a lot for talking
Thank you
to
very
us.
much.
I think we'll
Appreciate it.
make you our tax expert. You're listening to Dialogue on CD 101.9. I'm Pat Prescott. Thanks for waking up with us today.